Hello guys, welcome to today's video. I am going to teach you how you can use the pronoun se in Spanish. I know many of you struggle with this word because it appears in many contexts. Sometimes the use is not very clear. So in this video, I hope after all of this explanation, you can feel ready to understand all the uses that it has. So basically, there are 8 different uses for this pronoun, and I have ordered them according to the level where you will find them. Okay, so the first use, which is the reflexive use, is the first one you're going to learn. This one is in the first level that you study Spanish, A1, and from then on it's going to become harder and harder, or at least higher in difficulty or in level. So there are basically 8 different uses for se. Se can be a reflexive or a reciprocal pronoun. We can use it to talk about changes of state. It can be used as an indirect object pronoun, also in passive voice or impersonal constructions. It's also used with ingestion verbs, and the last use is going to be just generally as a pronominal word. So let's start with the first use, which again, as I mentioned, is the first one you're going to encounter. It's probably one of the most common uses of se, and it's the one you guys learn in level A1. In order to make this as clear as possible, I'm going to start explaining what is reflexive. What do teachers mean when we say this word, right? Reflexive basically means that the person who does an action is also the person who received that action. So in other words, the subject and the object are the same on a sentence. In English, you can translate this as to myself, to yourself, to himself or to herself. So in this chart, the part that you see at the left, which is me, te, se, nos, os, se, are the forms that this pronoun can take according to who is doing and receiving the action, okay? You need to memorize this. There is no other way. And I have highlighted se as to himself and herself, and se as to themselves because, well, the topic of this video is how to use se. I also showed you the other pronouns, the other forms, but basically there you have se highlighted. Okay, in this slide, you can see 2 sentences, 2 examples, one of them with verb ducharse, the other one with verb acostarse. These examples are not reflexive uses, okay? So this is not the reflexive se that I'm going to teach you in this video, but I want to start from here. Okay, so the first sentence says, él ducha a su perro, he showers his dog. Él is the subject, a su perro is the object, so this is not reflexive. Different subject and different object. The second sentence the same. Ella acuesta a su bebé. She gets her baby to sleep. Ella is the subject, a su bebé is the object, okay, so she's doing the action, the baby is receiving the action. This is non-reflexive. Now, let's compare these sentences to these other 2 over here. On the top one, we have él se ducha. This translates as he showers himself. So do you see that se that is highlighted? This se over here basically is the reflexive pronoun and is saying he is doing the action, but he is also receiving that action. The second example is also with him. Él se acuesta, he gets himself to bed. We are using se because we are saying the same person doing the action is also the person receiving the action. So you have here a comparison of the same verbs, but 2 different uses. The right one is non-reflexive, the left one is reflexive. The second use of se, reciprocal pronoun, pronominal reciprocal, this one is basically learning B1 level officially, but I have to say that you're probably going to encounter examples of this much earlier. I would say A2 probably is going to be common to see. It's a very simple use. It's similar in a way to the previous one we have seen, to the reflexive use, but there is a slight difference. Let's see how it works. Reciprocal subject is also the object, okay? So it's the same. The subject and the object of a sentence are the same. But what is the difference then? Okay, so a reciprocal pronoun describes an action that 2 or more people do to each other. That's the key. So for example, if you see the picture over here or the image over here, you have a group of people that are hugging each other. If I would be using the reflexive se, I would be saying a group of people are hugging themselves. So like this, right? It would be very weird. Reciprocal use refers that a group of people are hugging each other, not to themselves. With this in mind, we can see that the forms that we are going to use are always the plural forms, right? So nos, to us, like to one another, to you guys, to plural, or to them. There is a small exception to this. So normally, yes, is almost always going to be plural forms. If you guys study any language, you will know that it's very hard to find 100% rules that word for everything. So normally, yes, they are gonna be plural. However, there is a type of nouns, a type of uncountable nouns normally, which are called collective nouns, which basically are treated as singular grammar-wise, but they refer to a group of people, they refer to a collective. People, family, public, so la gente, la familia, el público, all of this, they don't have an S at the end, so they are grammar-wise, they are singular, but they refer to a group of people. So if the subject of the sentence is one of these words, then the verb needs to conjugate singular. Let's look at the example here. If I want to say, the people of this town love each other a lot, then again, people is going to be treated as singular, and la gente de este pueblo se quiere mucho is correct, but se quieren is not, because la gente, even though it's a collective or a group, grammar-wise is singular. Okay, so just keep this in mind. It's one exception to the rule. Otherwise, reciprocal pronouns are always going to be plural. Two of the most common reciprocal verbs are darse un abrazo, to hug each other, or darse la mano, shake hands. Okay, so you can see here a couple of examples. Ellos se dan un abrazo, they hug each other. Ellos se dan la mano, they shake hands, obviously to each other. Okay, the third use. This use, as you can see, is called basically cambio de estado, change of state. But if you notice, I added 3 levels to it. A2, B1 and B2, A2, B1 and B2. The reason why I do this is because there are different things you can learn with the use of this set. And the basic ones you see in A2, but then later on there is some more complex ways to use it. And I'm going to explain everything on this video, okay? I'm going to start with a little bit more basic. First of all, I'm going to explain what do I mean by change of state, right? So, when I mean change of state, I mean that there is a type of emotional, physical change, or just a generally speaking change of a state of the person. Let's see an example here. In this picture, we have a person who seems to be very sad. So if I just describe this person, I would say, está triste. She is sad. I'm just describing this person. However, if I want to indicate change of state, there has been some change on her feelings, I'm going to say se pone triste, she gets sad. Okay, so I'm not describing the feeling that she has at that moment. I'm telling you something happened and that thing made her change her feelings, made her feel sad. So that's what change of state means here. So, change of state can be a general change, for example, here status, from single to married, se va a casar. It can be physical, for example, from having hair to going bald, se ha quedado calvo, okay? So again, here, I'm not describing how the person looks at the moment, I'm telling you he lost his hair. Basically, something happened and he lost his hair. Well, maybe nothing happened, right? But I'm highlighting the change of the physical appearance. Lastly, the last example is feeling-wise, like emotional. The person is normal, and then suddenly something happens, and that makes him mad. Se enfadó mucho. He got very angry. He got very mad. But again, I'm not describing the feeling of the person at the time. I'm highlighting that there has been a change of state. Okay, so up until here, this is level A2. Here you have some other examples that you can use in this context. Enfadarse, alegrarse, ponerte triste. Anyway, you can stop the video, try to see how many you know, try to see how many you can learn. They are very common in this level, okay? But especially what is higher than A2 is basically to use verbs like ponerse, volverse, convertirse en, and hacerse to talk about changes of state. So first, ponerse is used for short-lived changes, so normally related to emotions. For example, se puso muy nervioso, the sentence we see over here, right? This is a change of state, a change of emotion, so it's a short-lived change. Volverse is more used with permanent changes, so it's related to personality or some changes that are not so short. Se volvió muy pesimista. Pessimist, again, is personality description. Convertirse en refers to a total change of nature or a change that requires a lot of effort to achieve. The example here is el agua se convirtió en hielo, the water became ice. Okay, so here we have a change of nature. If there is a change that requires a lot of effort, we can say something like se convirtió en presidente. He became a president. And lastly, hacerse refers to a change of belief or profession. Se ha hecho médico, he or she became a doctor. That is a change of profession, change of belief. Se ha hecho cristiano, for example. So again, this is for level, I would say, B1, B2. It's a little bit more complex. And with this, basically, we finish the third use of se. The fourth one is how to use se as an indirect object pronoun. objeto indirecto. I am going to assume you don't know what is an indirect object, and I'm going to teach you how to identify indirect objects in a sentence. First of all, not all sentences have either direct or indirect objects. Some of them have, so I'm going to teach you how to identify them. The first thing we need to do is to identify the verb. So what is the action of this sentence? Pepe gives flowers to Pepa. Pepe le da flores a Pepa. Okay, in this sentence, you can think about it. If you need to stop the video first, feel free to do so. But in this sentence, the verb is da, gives. This is the action, right? The next thing we have to do is ask ourselves, okay, which object is receiving the action of the verb? So we have two things here, give flowers or give Pepa. In this context, the person is giving flowers, so flowers is the direct object. Keep in mind the direct object is not always going to come right after the verb. In this sentence, I could say, Pepe le da a Pepa flores. So I can switch the order of objeto directo and objeto indirecto, direct and indirect objects. So do not trust which one goes first and second, because that's not always going to tell you which one is which. Just always identify the verb and ask the verb. What are you doing? Over who or over what? In this case, it's flores. Okay, so what is a Pepa? A Pepa is what we are looking for, which is the indirect object. And in order to identify the indirect object, we have to ask who or what receives the direct object. In this case, the direct object is the flowers. The person receiving the flowers is Pepa. So a Pepa is the indirect object. Now, you might notice here there is a le over here that is highlighted in the same color as a Pepa. This happens because in Spanish we duplicate. In sentences that have indirect object, we duplicate the indirect object. If I translated this le to English, this would be to her. Literally, Pepe to her gives flowers to Pepa. So you see to her and to Pepa is repeated. Is how we do it in Spanish, is how natives do it. If you don't say it, we will still understand it, but keep in mind that's how natives say it. So I wanted to give you the real example, right? How we say it. Okay, so then we can say the indirect object is the object that receives the direct object. Now, here you can see there is no se. And I'm going to explain you why now. If we go back to this sentence, Pepe le da flores a Pepa, Pepe gives flowers to Pepa, I can choose to simplify it, and I can choose to say Pepe gives flowers to her. Okay, in this case, all I need to do is to remove a Pepa, and I don't need to do anything else because le is to her, that is already there, so I don't need to change anything else. So, Pepe gives flowers to her would be Pepe le da flores. All we did is take away a Pepa. However, I can go further and I can say Pepe gives them to her. So I can take both direct and indirect objects and I can make them pronouns. I can simplify this, okay? So if I want to say that, if I want to say Pepe gives them to her, that le is going to change to se. And that is when you can see se in indirect object. Pepe se las da. Pepe gives them obviously is the flowers, to her. So we are going to see se when both the direct and indirect object in a sentence are changed to pronouns. If only the indirect object is changed, then it's not se, it's going to be le, as you can see here. If I change both, then se plus los, la, lo, las, whatever is the direct object, okay? So well, this is the fourth, I believe, use of se. Uso 5, the fifth use, passive voice, voz pasiva, okay? This is B1, I would say a little bit more advanced than the previous one, B1, B2 level, I would say. Okay, this sentence here, she sells her house. Ella vende su casa. This is an active voice sentence that is very simple, okay? We have a subject, a verb and an object, and here I highlight that ella is the agent because the agent is the person or the thing that does the action on a sentence. Keep in mind, subject and agent are not always the same, so in this case I'm going to talk about agent. The agent is ella because she's the one who is selling the house. Now, compare this sentence to this sentence over here. Se vende casa, house for sale. This sentence is passive voice and we don't have the agent because we don't know who is selling the house. We don't know, okay? So the agent is unknown. However, I told you before that I wanted to separate agent from subject because in passive voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. So the subject goes after the verb. In this sentence, se vende casa, casa is the subject. And why is this important? Because the verb always looks at the subject to conjugate. It has to agree with the subject, right? With the person of the subject. So this means that verbs in passive voice sentences with se have two forms. In this case, vende, or if we had a plural subject, it would be venden. Okay, here you have some examples. Again, vende is the verb, casa is the subject. Here we have some examples. For example, here, things. Se alquila apartamento, singular. Se alquilan apartamentos. This is plural. Se busca perro, se buscan perros. Se necesita actor, se necesitan actores. Again, there is no agent on the sentence, but there is the subject, and the verb looks at the subject to conjugate. Okay? So this use is very similar to the next use we are going to study, or we are going to see, which is impersonal se. Very similar. Okay? What is the difference between passive voice se and impersonal se? Well, basically, impersonal se, there is no subject. So the verb is always kept in the third person singular, which is él, ella, usted, he, she. Aquí se come muy bien. In this sentence, as we can see, come is the verb, muy bien is not the subject because I'm not telling you what is being eaten. I'm just telling you it's a very good place to eat. Okay? We can add here, for example, also frequency of time. Okay? Like, for example, an adverb like todos los días. Aquí se come todos los días. So in this case, these words refer to the frequency of time that this action happens. It's not a thing, so this is not the subject. Now, I want you to take a look at this. You can stop the video for a second and think about what's going on here. The first sentence, we have se buscan actores de teatro. Okay, buscan is plural, actores is also plural. On the second sentence, se busca a actores de teatro. Okay, both sentences are grammatically correct, but I want you to think, why is the second sentence singular? Why is buscan not buscan? We have actores, which is plural, right? So you can stop the video, you can think about it, and now I'm going to tell you the answer, basically. So what's happening here is that the first sentence is a passive voice sentence, because buscan actores, actores is plural, right? But the second one, what's going on is that this is se impersonal. It's an impersonal construction. Why? Because actores is not the subject, is the object, the direct object in this case, okay? If after the verb, the thing that comes after, the noun that comes after, we add a plus a person or an animal, this is not the subject anymore, is the object, normally the direct object. So, se busca a actores, this sentence, when adding a, becomes an impersonal sentence, and busca does not conjugate, because the verb conjugates with the subject and not with the object. Now we go to the seventh use. Guys, this is C1 level. This is very advanced, and this is how to use se with verbos de ingestión, ingestion verbs. What do we mean by ingestion verbs? Okay, the most common ones are these four: tomar, beber, comer, and fumar. When you're basically ingesting something, you're putting something in your body. Okay, so this is what we refer by ingestion verbs. And this use is actually not a mandatory use. However, if you are in level C1, you really have to learn this, okay? Number one, because a lot of natives actually use it, it's very common. And number two is this is what is gonna differentiate you from B2, C1, or like higher levels. So you do need to get used to this use. In which context can we use se with ingestion verbs? We need to specify the object, the thing that is being ingested. Otherwise, we cannot use se. Look at the example here. She eats 2 slices of pizza. I can say, ella come 2 trozos de pizza, that's fine, but I can also say, ella se come 2 trozos de pizza. And this is basically the use of se as an ingestion verb, because we are specifying the thing that she's eating. However, look at this other sentence here. If I just say she eats pizza, ella come pizza, here I'm not talking about this specific pizza here, I'm not talking about these slices, I'm talking maybe about a habit, I'm maybe telling you that she doesn't have allergy to something. In this case, se cannot be used. So I cannot say ella se come pizza, this is not correct. Another example, ella come mucho. She eats a lot. Mucho is not a specific thing that she's eating, so ella se come mucho is not correct. Okay, and now we come to pronominal. Generally pronominal, when se is
just used as a pronominal without much more explanation. As you can see here, I wasn't very sure about which level to add here because you can see examples on, I would say, absolutely every level. Okay, and this happens because there are some verbs that almost always they are going to work as pronominal. I don't like to say always because yes, in a few occasions some of them might not work as pronominal, but almost always, if some of them directly always are going to work as pronominal. Some of these examples are arrepentirse, to regret something, se arrepintió de sus acciones, enterarse, to find out, se enteró de que ella le había mentido, quejarse, to complain, or rebelarse, to rebel. For example, in this case, it's like an army, right? El ejército se rebeló contra su rey. So these are just a few of the examples. There is a lot of them. Maybe in A1 it's a little bit harder to find examples. There are still some of them, but from level A2 to higher levels, you're gonna encounter verbs that you just have to learn that they go together with se. You just have to memorize them together because they are hardly going to be separated. So with this, guys, you understand now all the uses that se has. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much for staying to watch the video. If you can subscribe, click like. It's very helpful for me. This presentation and these videos take a very long time to do. So if you like my work, please, I would appreciate if you can subscribe, like, and let me know in the comment section if there is anything else you would like me to cover in future videos, and I will do so. Hasta luego.